Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
A Time for True show is sponsored by the Office of Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, a periodontal, dental implant and laser specialist in New York City, for over 40 years. Dr. Fialkoff was honored by the International College of Dentists and Pierre Fauchard, and received the Presidential Lifetime Humanitarian Honor from the White House. Call us at 718-229-3838.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome to A Time for True show. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, and it's a pleasure to be with you again tonight. And we'll be continuing as part 2 of what we started on the previous show, because we're dealing with something that's afflicting not only America, but the world in its entirety. Chronic pain, depression, and all the associated maladies that we're suffering from. But this show is not about maladies, but it's going to be about solutions and about how really nature and God put certain things in place that we can actually utilize to improve what's been going on. And so we're going to get right to the show because we have so much to cover. And engineer, let's put on the first image and let's reorient our viewers to what we were talking about on the last show. We were talking about how your body works, your nervous system, your immune system, how they collaborate to help you to avoid negativity, pain, stress, warn you with pain, warn and get you away from danger. And let's start out again with what we've been suffering from, which we talked about in the last show, and a study from the CDC, the U.S. Center for Disease Control, that showed that about 50 million Americans suffered from chronic pain, lasting more than 3 months, and resulting in so much discomfort, so much upset, healthcare costs, lowered productivity. And the other thing that we sometimes forget in this technological age of numbers is those are people. Those are actual human beings. And if you were one of those people, regardless of the number, you would be suffering. And it'd be something you'd want to get free of. And so this show will be, how do you get free of that? How do you avoid this chronic pain that's unrelenting, that's debilitating, that keeps you from working, from your normal activities, that leads to depression, that leads to Alzheimer's, dementia, to suicide, to substance abuse and misuse? How can we avoid that? So let's go to the next slide, engineer, and we'll start discussing what's been going on. But first I want to give you another shocking statistic. This one from IQVIA 2020, that 76,940,157 Americans were taking psychiatric drugs. And out of those, 45,204,771 were on antidepressants. It's really a shocking number of unhappy people, people suffering, people not being able to be well. And to give you an example of the danger, if one of those people were to take just Tylenol because they had pain, if they didn't want to take an opioid, they were a good person, they took Tylenol. Well, Tylenol affects the metabolism of those antidepressants, increasing their concentration, meaning that that person could have toxicity from that drug that he was taking and possibly have respiratory depression, possible death. Horrific to think that from taking a simple Tylenol that those people are subject to this grave danger. So let's go on to the next slide. And Buddha, if you will, I want to show the viewers all the different medications that exist for these problems that we're suffering from. The antidepressants, the barbiturates, the substances that are being given for bipolar. It's really, really horrific. The Elavil, the Wellbutrin, the Cymbalta, the Lexapro, the Prozac, the Paxil for antidepressants. The barbiturates, the Nembutal, Luminol, Seconal, the barbiturates, leading to depression, and the bipolar drugs, the Tegretol, the Lamictal, the Depakote, the sodium valproate, all these different drugs, and then the antipsychotics, the Sequinolone, the Haldol, the Stelazine, and horrific amounts of drugs for these maladies. Is there a solution? Is there some way we can ameliorate this, to make this better, to make it less a medication that has to be used? Let's go on to the next image, and we'll go to another aspect of this drug situation, which now has to do with pain, how to get away from the pain. And here you have it on the screen. So if a person starts out, they try the Tylenol, the Motrin, the aspirin, the Advils, and it seems to work. But with these chronic pains, next thing they graduate to the opioids. These other medications are not working. The hydrocodone, the oxycodone, maybe a fentanyl patch. Very dangerous, but it's being used across the country. And then we have all the antidepressants you saw on the other page to block norepinephrine, which is a transmitter of pain in certain circumstances. And the Valium, or what's called the benzodiazepines, to inhibit what are called GABA transmitters of pain. And anticonvulsants, the gabapentin, for the same thing, to reduce the release of glutamates and other neurotransmitters. So here you see the tremendous amounts of medication that's being utilized in our country. If we go on to the next picture, Buddha, and we say to ourselves, is there some kind of solution to this tremendous drug problem? Is there some direction we can head that's going to be different than pharmacological? Is there an alternative? Is it something that's going to work? In the last show, we went over some of the normal endogenous mechanisms that occur. If we go on to the next slide, engineer, we talked about how the body has its own opioids. The body has its own dopamine. And the body has its own, what are called endorphins, or endogenous morphine. And if we go on to the next image, what I want to show the viewers is some actual facts from different organizations about what's been happening in our world and how to solve this problem of this drug situation, because we have other alternatives that have been popping up, and it's been shown in certain studies that it seems we have them. Here you go. Here you have one from Harvard. And this is from Harvard Health, from the medical school at Harvard, stating that a 2019 study showed that doctors had been overprescribing opioids, and that researchers found that there was too much prescribed medication, and that this was being utilized rather than alternative treatments, such as physical therapy, such as counseling, such as other types of non-pharmacological interventions. And that in actuality, what they were doing was at odds with what the experts recommended, and which actually was recommended by the Center for Disease Control when it published its guidelines on chronic pain. So let's go on to the next slide, please, engineer. And we'll go further with this on the next image. Let's take a look at an oath that I took as a surgeon and that all doctors take, the Hippocratic Oath. The Hippocratic Oath says that I will follow the system or regimen which, according to my ability and judgment, is for the benefit of my patients. And I will abstain from whatever is a deleterious or mischievous end, and I will give no deadly medicine to any of my patients if asked, nor suggest such counsel. But let's look at the facts in our country. Is this oath actually being followed? Because in 2023, we lost 112,000 Americans from drugs, illicit drugs. And this statistic was a previous year of 109,000 deaths from illicit drugs. And in 2021 was 107,000, pretty much almost doubling a 10-year Vietnam War in 1 year each year. So I would say that's deadly medicine, medications with tremendous repercussions. Let's go on to the next image, please, engineer. And we have to take a look and say, it looks like something needs to be modified. So let's take a look at the basis for something that's been published by the CDC and other organizations. And that's one, that our natural body has something called endorphins. We have naturally painkillers called endorphins, which are released by the brain in the hypothalamus and in the pituitary gland. And these endorphins relieve pain naturally. And not only do so, but it's almost amazing how God put this there, that because you see that chronic pain leads to depression, but what's natural and is God-given, the endorphin relieves the pain and creates a general feeling of well-being, the reverse of what's been happening in our country. And the name endorphin comes from endogenous, which means within the body naturally, morphine. So not a morphine coming from a poppy field or coming from a trafficking of drugs, but the morphine coming naturally from the body. So how does this happen? How can we utilize this? Is it possible? Is what I'm saying just some dream or illusion? Let's go to the next image, and let's take a look at this next image. We'll go further into what we're describing, because endogenous, meaning within the body, hormones that are produced naturally are things that you get that's very well known. People say there's something called a runner's high. You run, you finish, you started tired, and somehow at the end you feel good. You feel elated. You feel like you've accomplished something. And when you laugh, or you laugh with your friends, things seem to improve. When you're with your spouse or with your partner and you have love, or you're involved and you have sex, which is a normal activity, and you feel good afterwards, or you go out with friends, with family, and you have delicious meals, that elevates the endogenous endorphins. When you do spiritual pursuits, and basically it's so interesting that all these pro-survival activities stimulate your normal endorphins in your body to give you normal pain relief, to give you normal elation and well-being without drugs, illicit or medicinal. Let's go on to the next image, and we will go further into our investigation on this and see what is really possible. Here we have some strategies on improving your endorphin levels. An anti-inflammatory diet, a diet that's not high in refined foods, sugars, processed foods, a more organic or a natural diet, more vegetables, more fruits, more of a healthy diet, nuts, having sun exposure. When you have winter time, you see many times with the darkness, you get depressed. That's because we lose the light. And when we lose the light, there's a decrease in the endorphin levels, even something called serotonin levels. You see that seeing a chiropractor, seeing your doctor, seeing your dentist, seeing your holistic healer, taking care of yourself as best possible leads to better endorphin levels. Listening to music that you enjoy, eating some dark chocolate, unbelievable how you could have that, but high organic chocolate, 85% or more, very good for you. Deep breathing, exercise, laughing, stretching, all of these things increase your endorphin levels. Let's go on to the next image, please, Buddha. So here we start getting an idea, and it's very interesting how in nature those things that we see are good for us, or we're taught to do, or we're guided to do, and now we're finding out scientifically that they weren't just philosophies, that they actually deal with healing mentally, physically. Here we have more of what's called a holistic approach, or a more natural approach. And we find out that the body, aside from the endorphins, also has what's called an endocannabinoid system. Endo, again, being within the body. And you say cannabinoid, but wait a second. Cannabinoid, that's cannabis, that's marijuana. You see, I told you so. No, this is not an external medicine, an external drug. This is internal in the body. The body has its own endocannabinoid system that it uses under its control. And what happens, it uses this system to keep the body running well, to keep you happy, to keep functioning. And the evidence exists scientifically that certain foods and activities help this endocannabinoid system function optimally, improving your health, and enhancing the effectiveness of anything you do, including your medical treatment. So what can be utilized? Well, number one, again, nutrition. So what would you eat? Eggs, chocolate, herbs, spices, walnuts, flax seeds, a good ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids, echinacea, turmeric, tea, all these different, salmon you could include in there. Good, healthy nutrition. Number two, your physical lifestyle, reducing your stress, getting exercise, getting a little better sleep so that you can actually allow your body to heal overnight. All of this directly affects and improves the ability of your endocannabinoid system to make you feel good, to make you feel healthy, to not need external stimulation, to not be depressed, to not have pain. Your body has this internally. But what goes against this and what starts destroying your endocannabinoid system? Pesticides. So where do we see pesticides? Well, if you buy the wrong food, if you buy food that's not grown properly, you're going to be ingesting pesticides. It's not just that you have to work in agriculture. The food that you eat, if it's grown with too many chemicals, with too many insecticides, pesticides, this will inhibit and harm your body, giving you pain, giving you an altered immune system. Stress is another factor. Alcohol. And the alcohol obviously is related to the stress. Because why would someone want alcohol? Probably they weren't feeling good about something, or they wanted to escape something, or they got used to it over the years because they've had stress for too long. Or maybe they've eaten the wrong food for too long. Or maybe they had toxicity from chemicals and pesticides that they ate without even realizing it years ago when they were younger, but it accumulated in their bodies. A negative lifestyle, a poor diet, all these things impair your endocannabinoid system. Let's go on, Buddha, to the next slide, please. So, we want to look at these factors and realize that what you do and what is pro-survival somehow with nature has already been put together, that our bodies respond to exercise, to socializing with our friends. It's very interesting because the Surgeon General of the country came out about 4 months ago with an advisory stating that in America we were suffering from an epidemic of loneliness and isolation, and that it wasn't a philosophy, that it was a scientific reality. And he spoke about the studies, the scientific studies showing how this had occurred and the results, and the fact that he urged, and he said that not only that he urged, but that actually it was our duty, very high words that the Surgeon General used, that it was our duty to have more social interaction, to have more communication with each other. This from the top physician of the country. He didn't recommend for us to medicate each other more. In fact, he said that the socialization would lead to better physical and mental well-being. And he went on further to state that the socialization would lead to an improvement in many of the community ailments that we're suffering from. The crime, the drugs, the homelessness. And why did he say that? And how did he come to this conclusion? From scientific studies that he quoted. And this is something that actually has been coming out more and more, which is why the CDC recommends so many alternative, or what's called multimodal. Multimodal meaning many different ways. Aside from pharmacological, aside from drugs, other ways of helping and of treating. And if we look at this and we start applying, just like when you go to the gym, sometimes at the beginning you walk out sore and you want to give up. And the same thing, I'm sure, when you try to change your nutritional habits. But you have to realize that sugar is also a drug and is very addicting. So there'll be a period of time when you try this where it'll probably be a little difficult to get off of what you've been eating and to change. But if you look at the benefits of the possibility of getting rid of depression, of the possibility of being happier, of the possibility of saving money on so many of the drugs that you're purchasing, the possibility of decreasing healthcare costs in the country, and having a community that gets along better with less alarm systems, where the police are respected and where they feel comfortable, and members, happy members of society, where they're not made wrong for all the ailments. I think it's time that we stop criticizing each other. Something that I learned long ago as a surgeon is that the surgery is in my hands. The patient is always the patient. Sometimes I make it easier, sometimes I make it more difficult, but the one who's making the decisions is always the person in charge. And so, as you watch this show, realize that anything worthwhile is worth fighting for. Ask yourself, do I want to be in chronic pain? Or would I like to get rid of it? Would I like to deal with why I haven't felt good and not just try to block it out with drugs, alcohol, and other means of isolation? Is it possible that I can actually confront a situation I haven't ever wanted to look at? Because now I see that the Surgeon General is telling me that it's affecting my physical and mental health. Is it possible for me to actually, a little bit at a time, get better? And what you're seeing today on this show, with what nature has within inside your body, and what we went over in the first show, how the body itself and the brain will moderate pain that comes in the exterior. Just like an athlete who plays football or basketball and gets hurt, but is so excited to play and has so much endorphins that he doesn't feel the pain. And after the game, he's not injured because his attitude is different, because his emotion is higher. He's more spiritual. He's more in tune with his environment. Let's take a look at a different way of living. Let's take a look and change the game. Let's see if we can have more well-being, more natural, less costly to you, happier to you. The Romans once said that laughter was the best solution for mental disease. And now it's so interesting that so many years later, we find out the same thing being quoted for the endorphins and for many of these things that exist naturally. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I bid you a very well future, a happy future, and a future where our country blossoms and prospers, and all of us can lead happy lives. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of our Time for Truth show. Be well.
This show was sponsored by A Time for Truth Foundation Incorporated as a community service.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet